All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Lead here for our last time in what we know as 2020, and we're going to forget 2020 as soon as we possibly can and get into 2021. So we're looking forward to 2021 and welcome you again here today. Just know that last week we talked to you about patience, and we'll talk to you about what we've learned and educate you on what we've learned really since then. Um, Patience means that we continue to not know when we can begin competing, and I know that that's been our most popular questions, but there have been others as well. So I think we continue to make progress. We'll talk about what we've really done and learned since last Thursday. And again, remember that we're always best when we're in control of our own decision making. Yet we're relying on the state really when it comes to competitions right now and the basis for their decisions as we continue to work with them. Where we're seeking further clarification, where we still have questions and you still have questions as we continue to hear. And then what can you be doing now? Working with our liaisons yesterday, understanding your perspective and what you're doing and maybe how we can assist and what you can be doing. Um, just an update on winter competitive sections for those of you that have either registered for an activity for the first time or a new co-op. And then Laura has an update on games wanted. That would be maintenance around what we've heard, and then scheduling in it itself. So if we can move forward, Laura. Really since last Thursday. And again, we met with those of us that run tournaments met with state epidemiologists as of last Thursday afternoon. I know many believe that we were going to go into that meeting and come out of it with a competition date. We spent more time giving them information, educating them, right, through dialogue on what you've done so well, and what we want to continue to do. And are there areas that would make them feel more comfortable as we start practice and hoping to play as soon as possible? So that's what occurred really since last Thursday with that group in MDH. And yet we've continued to have dialogue with MDH. And as of Sunday, they're seeking input on things like the questions that we have as they're gathering information. And I believe getting prepared to make decisions hopefully as soon as possible. Again, we continue to ask questions of them. They continue to ask questions of us. We have learned throughout this that our educating them on what we do and how we do it is extremely important. There's a good level of trust, I would say, and respect right now for the work that you do and the work that our coaches do. We continue to tell them that we are the best opportunity to begin practice and playing as soon as possible. Getting back into competition will solve some of the questions around those that are going outside of state borders or doing other things that do not assist us in beginning that process. So that data, again, is good data, and it works for us on our behalf, and we're going to continue to need to do that. And then we're preparing for what's next, right? So we're working on guidance to the best of our ability, taking a look at schedules, what that means, counting weeks, continuing to have conversations around what happens after the regular season. Those green areas in that model, what is that going to look like? What does sections look like? I know our region secretaries, again, continuing to be chomping at the bit, wanting to get those schedules done for postseason. And then what does it look like following postseason? And we're working with facilities, working on dates, looking at costs on some of those opportunities and trying to get those in place as well. And we're preparing to communicate with you. Much like our last executive order, it was a waiting game, right? We first thought it was Wednesday, then possibly Friday, then possibly Monday, and then it was Wednesday, if I remember it right. And that's where we're at again right now. We even talked today about should we have the potential of lead tomorrow? Would we know any more? What we do know is we're going to communicate with you first and to the best of our ability as quickly as possible. Eric, anything I missed here since since we last met on the work that we've done?
Nothing really there, Bob, and good morning, everyone. Thanks again for your time. I know a number of schools are out at this time, but it's great to have over 350 folks with us today. I think that just reiterating or maybe emphasizing a couple of things, we would always hope to have information to you as quickly as possible, yet oftentimes we're in a waiting pattern as well to make sure that we get the information correctly from them, them being the state agencies where they have that. I do think that it's important to recognize that we are taking our data collection tools and we are vetting those through the state to make sure that they are providing the information that the state needs so that they're able to use that most effectively. We are their best source. And part of what we had to share with MDH and try and help them understand is just the broad amount of contact we have across the state. When you share with them that we'll have 25,000 coaches certified by the end of the year in most years, that's very different from any other organization out there. And so we have a significant footprint, and we want to make sure that we're part of the conversations and moving that forward. To learn a little bit more, we'll move ahead a slide, and I'll start us there, and then we'll circle back. But when we talk with the Department of Health, Department of Ed, state level agencies, I think it's really important to understand a couple of things. First of all, I think that what is driving the decisions at the state level are the statewide data pieces and what our current situation is. And they take into account where the number of positive cases is, what does the positivity rate look like. Obviously, those positive cases end up in hospitalizations. And so they're looking at what is the capacity, where are we at with ICU beds available, et cetera. And then unfortunately, there are deaths that follow. And those are markers that they are watching along the way. And we all know by this point that any kind of gathering creates additional risk. And so a lot of their work is around how do they minimize risk to reduce the number of cases, et cetera. And obviously in social media, there's lots of discussion about, is this safer than that, or is that safer than this? What does that come down to? But just recognizing that from the state level, they're trying to keep numbers across the board down. And so we're probably not the group that should be deciding of if cases are going in the right direction or the wrong direction. Yet this morning, we heard from the state that numbers are starting to stabilize, and they're around that 63 cases per 10,000, which just a couple of weeks ago were all in triple digits across the state. The goal that the state has is to be back 10 or less. Now that's significant, a significant drop, yet we're seeing things going that direction. And if you go back to August and September, we had lots of counties that were well less than 10 at that time. So I think that's important. We continue to know that our place is significant in all of these decisions. As they make decisions, then we take those and apply them directly to our programs and try and do the best that we can as we go forward. And so I think that that's really been what we've learned. And Bob did a great job of identifying that we share just as much information with the departments as we get from them. And there's a number of things that we've shared their direction that they're taking a look at and reviewing, and we're waiting for responses back on those as we go forward. But Bob, anything else that I missed in that slide?
No, I think, again, just to reiterate as well, that we will be ready with guidance as quickly as possible to get you started on January 4th with any changes that are made. We will apply those decisions that are made for us at the state level and get those in guidance and communicate it out to you as soon as possible. Laura, I think we can move forward with one and really run some of the questions that we continue to hear are most popular. And we hear it from you, we've heard it from our liaisons as well. And really kind of in the order that we believe you need to get started on our most popular questions as well. In our guidance and information, again, as it is applied once we learn, use of masks during practice and competition tends to be a really popular question. I would say it's based on the interpretation of what is in the newest executive order. Executive order implies that not only masks, but shields are going to need to be worn by educators. So what does that mean for us? Again, that's a question we seek clarification on. Again, I think we should be prepared to have to wear masks in sports for practice and competition, yet we don't know that. I am not sensing, and I'll ask Eric as well, that necessarily means shields, right? Like, I think shields are identified for educators where they maybe have less control of their environments, less control of the distance in which they may be educating and the period of time in which they're doing so. So their environments are different. I'm sensing that the shields would not be for educators. So again, be patient on that. It's one of the first questions that we ask is, what does this mean based on how the newest executive order reads around masks? Pod sizes. Again, I believe there's been great dialogue between us on pod sizes. We believe that the number 25 has worked very well. for many of our sports, yet there are some where it doesn't work as well. So what is that magic number in terms of pods, and how does it apply per competitive field, right? So when we think about a hockey arena versus a gym or a um, multi-floor gym or multiple basketball floor gym or competitive floor gyms, then locker rooms, right? There are going to be areas again where can we and where can we not. There's great concern about those confined spaces where maybe there isn't airflow, and so definitively, what can and can we not expect when it comes to locker rooms. And there are sports that are more difficult. Back to the mask use, right? We educate them on things like swimming, right? Masks are one that if they're getting wet, they're not productive. And what does it mean for a sport like wrestling as well, where it becomes very difficult to wear a mask during competition? And then a little bit of again, a major question, a little bit of a surprise to me, I guess, in the latest order is the language around pools. If you remember back to the early fall, pools appear to be one of our most flexible spaces to be able to compete in. That has changed for whatever reason. Does that apply to us in our competitive programs, or is that more for general use and public use? And again, we know that swimming will begin for us on January 4th. And how quickly can we utilize those school pools? And just know we're having as much dialogue around that as anything else. And then we're sensing that there's less of a connection between learning models and activities um, around athletic participation, right? So we know that it tended to be a metric that was in place, and if if your metrics are such that you can or cannot participate, and then it went pretty local control, right? So what does that mean, and how do we work with member schools? As many of them are in virtual learning yet, we do hear more and more that are going back to hybrid or even in person. Again, that priority right now, beginning date for competition, and then I sure hope with the dialogue that we have that sooner than later. And as soon as we have that, we're going to get that out to you. Even if our guidance isn't quite ready, based on what we hear, you're going to get that information. We hear from liaisons and from schools, and Eric and I participated in a conversation at the state level with multiple youth sports organizations. Now, there was sentiment about the potential for beginning without spectators, right? Controlling that environment, allowing us to get started, and minimizing interruptions or disruptions due to that environment being uncontrolled when it comes to spectators. So that sentiment has been shared, and there's been good dialogue around that. Again, I talked about our region secretaries, and for you as well, we continue to look at those postseason dates and formats, hopefully optimistic around what can occur following those section competitions. And people want us back in their buildings to the best of their ability when it is feasible, right? Not sure what that means for spectators in some places. That's going to be very difficult, as we have to remember in the NCAA and even in the NHL and NFL and NBA, where you're seeing limited, if more likely than not, no fans. And then Eric, I'm going to ask you just to comment on where we're at on the interstate co-op participation, and then anything else that maybe they need to hear a different voice on with the further clarification.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, interstate co-op participation is a unique aspect that really probably impacts about 10 or so schools within the state of Minnesota, and they're co-opted in programs outside of the state lines. And when students participate within our member schools, and whether they co-op within the state or across state lines, our schools are still required to follow our guidance. Just know that on our borders, they aren't always doing the same thing we're doing. So right now, we've got a number of students that are sitting on the sidelines in comparison to teammates who are able to practice and or even compete. And that's really challenging. So we continue to advocate for ways in which we might be able to get some flexibility, because those seasons are not going to be delayed. They are in process right now. And so those students are losing opportunities that they would otherwise get. And so we know that's unique and different. We continue to talk with the state level around that and ask for that. And I think it's important to know that we advocate for a number of things. So when Bob mentions the conversations around swimming pools within our schools, we're advocating that we be able to have interscholastic teams be able to have practices in pools. They at the state level are going to have needs to remain consistent, likely. Yet that doesn't mean that we're not advocating for our programs to be able to get back to their particular passions with that. And as you look at this list of things that we're all looking for further clarification on, the one part that we own really of ourselves is really the postseason dates and formats, yet it's to some extent dependent on the beginning date for competition. So to get out in front of that, even though our schools are interested in postseason dates and formats and our region secretaries are very anxious to have all of that nailed down, once we get more of this information determined, that allows us to better put plans in place and put dates on calendars and really tighten those things up. So there's a linkage between pretty much everything on this list, and it really comes back to when are we going to get information that's going to be helpful. But our commitment is that we're going to get it out to you as quickly as we can. So, all right, you want to move ahead? Thinking that really goes into this particular upcoming communication. We're heading into a break. Some of you may already be on break, but that doesn't mean you're not looking for information. So we're going to do our very best to share information with you. We're going to use email, obviously, as our number one method to be able to reach you. If there are updated documents that get posted, which is likely to happen based on new information, when it does come, you'll get an email notification that will indicate that there's been updates to that as well. And so not only will we likely give you bulleted lists of information that now has been decided and here's how you can operate and move forward, if it has to do with guidance for specific sports or activities, that's going to be a part of this as well. And we'll continue to communicate throughout the holiday break here as we go forward. So Bob, anything further on that?
Yeah, and I know it's a frustration, right? If it's 3:30 tomorrow afternoon before many of you, if you aren't on break, are heading into a break, but if and when we find out that information on these questions, and it may be one at a time, right? Expect that to you as soon as possible in the form of an email. We do not have control of potentially how the state communicates that, but we're going to get that to you as soon as we possibly can. Otherwise, I think we can move on here to what we know and what you can continue to work on. We know that our winter sports are in virtual mode. Our fine arts are in virtual mode, and we're going to come back into January here, and we're going to have a state tournament and debate, and on January 15th and 16th, I believe. So fine arts are moving along in a virtual format, and Amy's doing a great job, and many of those that are upcoming here in our office to prepare to do so. What do in-person practices look like on January 4th, and what facilities are available to you outside of maybe the traditional field facilities, things like strength and conditioning, weight rooms, so on and so forth? What does that guidance look like to get you started in those games? And really strongly encourage you again to work with your admin team and that COVID response team or that COVID coordinator in your building to prepare for students being back in your buildings, competing in the form of a practice or practicing in your buildings. What does that look like? What is the time in between practices? What are your protocols that are in place for your buildings, entrance and exiting, making sure that sanitization takes place? Don't forget about things that worked well for us and that you continue to have in place, things like screening and those protocols. Making sure your coaches are ready to go, making sure their clipboard or their dashboard is up to date. General rules meetings can be done around the winter sports, and also obviously the sports specific rules meetings as well. And then there's a head coaches course that again meets state statute for new head coaches. That will be Sunday, January 10th. So thank you to Jody and Amy for having that. And again, that is January 10th. That is a Sunday that they can take that course. And then what can we do now, again, to get that controlled environment in place to the best of our ability so that we do not have the interruptions and disruptions to the best of our ability? When we go back to the state making those decisions and the metrics that they're using, again, how do we keep those numbers down and low? What is our social responsibility in this, and making sure that once we get going, that we hopefully have minimal interruptions and or disruptions. I will say this again, there are many youth agencies that are borrowing or adopting what we did in Model 2, which is normal for us to have, 10 days, 2 weeks of practice prior to that first competition, but also the other protocols that go along with it. Things like the 2 contests per week, again, provides us the opportunity to build time in between games. If there is transmission or if there is an outbreak, minimizing those that would have to be isolated or quarantined is a philosophy that has worked for us, and we're going to continue to use that, and that has went well and has been heard well. And what other protocols and guidelines are we not aware yet? Again, when do we have to have masks, when not? What do we know about pools? There's again language around shields. What does that mean? And what does that look like, not only in practice, but in competition? Eric or Laura, anything I missed here on what they can be working on now?
I think that's a really good summary, Bob. And I know folks are anxious to be doing lots of things. There's some things here you can be doing, but other things it still is going to be a wait and see. So I think we can move forward.
Yeah, and I think this is really a maintenance type question that we've received more than once, right? So just for clarification around bylaw 411.6, which has to do with scheduling as soon as March in a township election. So a township election does fit within that language, which means that competitions cannot occur between 6 and 8, according to language. Remember that to honor and the spirit behind that, not beginning at 8, but after that. And if that election, again, we don't have clarification on what if that isn't in person, we still believe it's an election date, and it is, and again, according to state law in this case, it is between 6 and 8. If there's any further clarification on that, we would let you know. And a township election, that has been the question more often than not, does fit into that category. And I believe the date was March 9th. There is that opportunity for an election to take place. So that is clarification there. Then next, I believe competitive section placement. I'm going to turn this over to Laura. I mentioned it in the agenda as well. Just know if your team being newly registered or in a new co-op, we're working on placing those right now, again, in our current maps where those exist. And many of those are happening as we speak. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Laura for updates around other information related.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Good morning, everyone. Down at the bottom of this slide, you'll see a picture off on the right-hand side that says section tournament information. That box is being added to a number of places on the website right now. Currently, it's under the tournament tab, the big tournament tab up at the top, but it will also be added to every activity page that has section competition. And you'll notice there are 2 links on there. The first one is section tournaments. Currently, our region secretaries are now in the website and they are building out section events. As Eric said earlier, we don't know a lot about those section events right now, specifically dates and times, but they are starting to build those so that when section events are scheduled and we have dates and times, those will be there for those. The second link there is section placements. That takes you to the competitive section map. In other words, where every activity plays their section events. Currently, that is linking back to the old website. That new build should start to show up in early January, and that's being built in preparation for competitive placement for this year. So again, you'll see that section tournament box in a number of places, and the 2 links there take you to section tournament information and section placement information. Then moving on, thinking a little bit about games wanted. So you'll find on your dashboard over on the right-hand side under the MSHSL resources, a link called Games Wanted. That takes you to a secondary subpage that has 2 sections on it as shown on the picture on the right here. The top part is for current season games. And this is the part that we rolled out in the fall, and people were appreciative of it for volleyball and football to find those kind of immediate games for this year. You'll notice it grows quite a bit as we have 9 events during the winter that are looking for games. So each of those is a link to submit a form. The blue checkmark Games Wanted listing results compiles all of those. So you can use the tabs down at the bottom to move among those games wanted. Again, a reminder that this is for winter 2021 games and should be kind of a quick, easy to find way to get to those. We will go in sporadically and start to remove those expired games so that those don't get cluttered with old information. Underneath that, where it says future seasons, that is the MNI AAA hosted games wanted for upcoming years. So again, as you schedule and some things are much more on the fly and you need things now, please use that current season area. If you're looking for things out into the future, there's the future seasons area. This is only on AD's dashboards. However, feel free to share this with coaches as that works within your school or district. We know that for some of you, this is really an AD job. For some of you, you turn some of these things over to coaches. So please feel free to share links to this page or off this page with others that you would deem should have this information. So with that,
Laura,
Bob,
maybe-
I'm going to.
Laura, let's
ahead.
back up a little bit to what they can do right now. There's some good questions that Susie's sending me. Some of the things that you can do right now. So questions that I'm hearing as you're scheduling, right? And Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. I think interstate play will be very similar to what it was in the fall, right? With that 50 mile language for those that do compete in schools outside of our state. I believe that'll continue to be in place. So remember the executive order 2099 referred to, again, what we're doing with the ability to use facilities, and then executive order 2103, our interpretation is that school facilities were not to be in use, things like weight rooms. So what does that mean on January 4th when we're back practicing? Again, that's a great question. And once we have that information, we'll share that with you as well. But we know that weight rooms tends to be a question. And then Laura, around the website, and again, tournament managers, region secretaries, requesting that you update your contact information for your coaches, right? So as tournament managers can begin communicating to those coaches, making sure that they have the correct contact information. That would be another thing that you could do right now, and would help our region secretaries and tournament managers and us for that matter as well in working with coaches and or advisors. Other than that, anticipate, and I think we can go back to that last slide. Staff, anything else before we send them on their way for the day and hopefully a holiday break?
I just had a heads up from someone that I missed boys swimming and diving on here, and which is interesting because I knew we had 10 and I looked at staying there 9. So I will get boys swimming and diving up there quickly also.
Great, thank you. And you need to expect communication from us, right? Not that you have to wait by your email or by your phone, whatever the case may be, but we are going to communicate. Expect us to communicate with you as soon as we possibly can to answer some of those questions shared with you today. We're going to continue dialogue yet today when questions are asked of us at the state level to help them make the best decision that they can as quickly as they possibly can. As I said earlier, we're going to say good riddance to 2020. And we believe 2021 is going to be a better place. And hopefully some of these questions are the last time we have to answer them as we head into our winter season, hopefully competing as quickly as possible. I think we're in a really good place with that spring season, right? We've protected that. We're in a place where we're going to begin that as soon as we possibly can. And hoping we have weather in first week of April, probably similar to what we do today. This is very out of the ordinary, but we wish you a happy holidays from the Minnesota State High School League. Thanks for 380 plus, I think, today being in attendance. Wish we had all the answers for you, but we're going to continue to work on your behalf and get that information as soon as we can, no matter when we receive it. So thank you again, and have a great break.